Okay, so I've given you 4 coordinates that represent the vertices of a quadrilateral. So first what we want to do is graph this quadrilateral, like so. And then we can't just assume that certain things are parallel, perpendicular, or congruent just by looking at it. So we're going to have to find the slope, use the distance formula, etc. in order to verify mathematically. So we're going to start by finding the slope of all of the sides. So I'm going to find the slope of AB is 4 minus 2 over 2 minus 4 equals 2 over negative 2, which is negative 1. The slope of BC is positive 1. The slope of CD is negative 1. And the slope of AD is positive 1. So if I put those slopes on their segments on the picture, I can see that my opposite sides have the same slope. Both pairs of opposite sides have the same slope, so that means it's a parallelogram. And then AB has a slope of negative 1. AD has a slope of positive 1. Those are my consecutive sides. Their slopes are opposite reciprocals. Those slopes of those lines are opposite reciprocals, which means that these two segments are perpendicular, which means that this is a right angle. So right now, we know that this is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. We're looking at a rectangle. We know that this is a rectangle. So the next thing we need to do is we need to determine, well, maybe it's not only just a rectangle, maybe it's also a rhombus. So in order to figure out if it's a rhombus, we're going to need to calculate the lengths of the sides. So in order to calculate the length of the sides, we need to use the distance formula. So I'm going to find the length of AB, subtract the x's, square it, plus subtract the y's and square it, take the square root of the whole thing. So 2 minus 4 is negative 2, squared is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2, squared is 4. So this is root 8, which simplifies to 2 root 2. So then I'm going to find the length of BC. The length of BC is 4 root 2. The length of CD is 2 root 2. And the length of AD is 4 root 2. So if I go put these side lengths onto my picture, I can see that the opposite sides are congruent, which makes sense because this is a parallelogram. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. But if I compare my consecutive sides, they are different. In a rhombus, all 4 sides are going to be the same length. All 4 sides are congruent. My consecutive sides are congruent. This is not a rhombus because my consecutive sides are not congruent. So the most specific name for this is a rectangle. So we have verified that it is indeed a rectangle. So then one more thing we can do to verify that this is actually a rectangle is we can find the length of the diagonals from A to C and from B to D. Because if it's a rectangle, then the diagonals should be congruent. So I'm going to find the length of AC, which is 2 root 10, and then I'm going to find the length of BD, which is also 2 root 10. So because those diagonals are congruent, it is a rectangle. It's just one more way, one more additional thing that we can do to prove that it is indeed a rectangle. So then, if we're going to write a sentence to explain how we knew this was a rectangle, first we need to write a sentence proving it's a parallelogram, because before you can say it's a rectangle, you have to say it's a parallelogram. ABCD is a parallelogram because both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So that was the first thing we did, was we found all the slopes of the sides. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. And then our second sentence is going to address the fact that it is a rectangle, but it's not a rhombus. ABCD is a rectangle because the consecutive sides are perpendicular. We knew the slopes of those consecutive sides were opposite reciprocals, so that told us that was a right angle, which told us it was a rectangle. But the consecutive sides are not congruent. If the consecutive sides had been congruent, if the consecutive sides had the same length, then it would have been a rhombus. So you want to address the fact that it is a rectangle because the consecutive sides are perpendicular, but it's not a rhombus because the consecutive sides are not congruent.